Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we have a really interesting topic. How to talk about things you did in the past in English.
It's a big topic.
It is a big topic,
Mm.
and there are lots of ways to do it, of course. But we're going to focus on just three today. We're going to be looking at used to would and the simple past tense.
Three very useful grammar structures.
They are. And to help us with this, we'll be looking at information from the Learn English website by the British Council.
A great resource for English learners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also an English grammar guide.
Excellent. So are you ready to dive in?
I am. And I think our listeners will find some really interesting things as we learn about these grammar structures together. Luckily, we have a grammar expert with us who can make even the most difficult grammar rules seem easy.
I'll do my best.
So let's start with used to.
All right.
Our sources say that we can use used to for things that were true in the past but are not true now.
Yes, that's a good way to think about it.
And this can be for things that happened many times, like habits, or for things that were always true for some time, like states.
It can be for both.
For example, you could say, I used to live in London, which is a past state. Or you could say, I used to play football every Saturday, which is a past habit.
Two great examples.
Is that right?
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Used to really helps us see the difference between the past and the present. It shows us that something continued or happened many times in the past, but doesn't happen anymore.
So it really emphasizes that change.
Exactly. Like in your examples, you lived in London for a period of time, but you don't live there now.
Yeah.
And you played football every Saturday, but you don't do that anymore.
That's a really clear explanation. Thank you. One thing that confused me for a long time is the difference between used to, followed by another verb, and be used to or get used to, followed by an ing verb. They sound so similar.
Yes, they do. And a lot of English learners get them mixed up. It's an understandable confusion.
So can we clear this up?
We don't have time to talk about the difference in detail today. Maybe we can do that in another episode. But it's important to know that they have different meanings. When we say used to and then another verb, we are talking about past habits or states that are no longer true. But when we say be used to or get used to and an ing verb, we mean becoming comfortable with something.
Okay, that's helpful to remember. Now let's talk about would. From our sources, it seems that would is used for things that happened many times in the past, like every summer we would go to the beach.
Exactly. Would is perfect for describing actions that happen regularly in the past. When you hear someone say would, you can almost imagine them doing that action over and over again. Like in your example, we can picture you and your family packing up the car, driving to the beach, and having fun in the sun summer after summer.
It really does paint a picture in your mind. And it makes me think of stories.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that would is often used in stories?
That's a great observation. Would is often used in storytelling, and it can make the stories sound a bit more formal. Another thing to remember is that would is different from used to, in that we don't normally use it for past states. For example, we wouldn't say, I would live in London.
I see. So we can't use it for past states, only for repeated actions in the past.
That's right. And it's less common to use would to ask questions or say that something did not happen regularly in the past.
So there are some limitations to using would then.
Yes, there are a few things to keep in mind.
Okay, now we have the simple past tense. Our sources say we can use the simple past tense for things that happened regularly in the past, just like used to and would.
You are absolutely right. The simple past tense is very versatile. You can use it in many different ways. You can use it to talk about past habits and states, and also things that only happened once.
So if I say we went to the cinema every Friday, I am using the simple past tense to talk about a past habit.
Exactly. You are simply stating that you went to the cinema every Friday in the past.
And one of our sources gives the example, we went to the same beach every summer. Can we compare that to, we used to go to the same beach every summer, or we would go to the same beach every summer? All three sentences seem to be about the same thing.
That's right. All three sentences describe a past habit of going to the beach, but there are subtle differences. Used to and would really emphasize that this happened many times over a long period. But when you use the simple past, we went, you are just saying that the family went to the beach every summer without highlighting how often or how long they did this. It sounds a bit more matter-of-fact.
So it really is about those small changes in meaning.
Exactly. Subtle but important differences.
And if I want to talk about something that happened only once, I have to use the simple past. For example, I visited Paris in 2019.
You got it. If you were talking about an event that only happened once, the simple past tense is the one to use.
Let's look more closely at would. Some people who are learning English have left comments on the Learn English website, and some of them are confused about using would with the word not to talk about past habits.
That's a good point. It's true that you don't hear would used with not very often to talk about past habits. But our source says it is possible to use it this way in certain situations. The example on the website may be there just to show you that it can be done, not to say that it's the most common way to talk about a past habit you didn't have.
That makes sense. It's a reminder that even with grammar, there are always exceptions and less usual ways of saying things. Another question from a learner is about using adverbs like always with used to. They want to know if it's okay to say I used to always. For example, I used to always go to bed early.
That is an excellent question. Both I used to always and I always used to are grammatically correct. But you are more likely to hear native speakers say, I always used to. It sounds more natural. For example, I always used to go to bed early.
It's these little things that can really help you sound more fluent. Here's another interesting question. Someone wants to know if they can use would to talk about past habits, like smoking. They give the example, she would smoke, but she stopped a few years ago.
This is where we need to think about when and why the action happened. Our source says that when we use would, we need to give more information about when or why someone did the action. She would smoke, but she stopped a few years ago is grammatically correct, but we need to add more details to understand the situation better.
So how could we change that sentence to make it clearer and make sure it follows the rules for using would for past habits?
We could say something like, she would smoke whenever she was stressed, but she stopped a few years ago. Adding, whenever she was stressed gives us a specific reason for the action of smoking. Now the sentence gives us more information and sounds more natural.
I see. It seems like we always need to give extra details about when or why the action happened if we're using would to talk about habits.
That's a very important point to remember about using would for past habits.
It's amazing how many little differences in meaning there are with these grammar points.
It is. And the more we explore these nuances, the more we can appreciate how interesting and expressive the English language is.
Well, I think that's a good place to stop for part one of our look at used to would and the simple past tense.
We will continue our exploration with you in part two. It's fascinating how a small change in grammar can really change how we understand what happened in the past.
It is, and it's amazing how much we can learn just by paying attention to how people use language.
You're right. We can learn so much just from listening and observing.
As we've been talking, I've been thinking about how often we hear these grammar structures in everyday English. I bet we hear them all the time in books, movies, and conversations, even if we don't realize it.
You are absolutely right. These grammar points are very important if you want to speak and write English well. They help us describe the past in a clear and interesting way, and they help us share our experiences with others.
Now that you mention it, I realize that I've definitely heard would used in stories to make the listener feel nostalgic or to set a certain mood.
It can definitely have that effect.
It's like a special technique that makes the story sound more elegant and formal.
Exactly. Would can sound very elegant and literary. It can also make us feel like we're traveling back in time to experience a different way of life.
And on the other hand, used to sounds more conversational and relatable, like when we're telling personal stories or remembering things from our past.
It does have that more personal feel.
It's a way of connecting with others by talking about how things have changed over time.
That's a great point. Used to feels very personal. It helps us think about how we've changed and grown as people.
It's incredible how much meaning these simple words can have. And I think that understanding these nuances can be really helpful for people who are learning English. It's like learning a secret code that helps you communicate more effectively and understand native speakers on a deeper level.
I completely agree. If you can master these grammar points, you will be able to speak and write English more fluently and accurately. You will be able to express yourself more confidently and precisely, making your thoughts and ideas clear and engaging.
It's like having a toolbox filled with different tools, and each tool has a specific job. If you understand how and when to use each tool, you can build more complex and interesting sentences and really become a master of the English language.
That's a great analogy. Language really is like a toolbox, and grammar is like the instruction manual that shows us how to use those tools correctly.
And just like any skill, the more you practice, the better you will become. The more you see and hear these grammar structures in real life in books, movies, and conversations, the easier it will become to use them naturally and correctly.
Absolutely. The best way to learn a language is to surround yourself with it. When you hear and read authentic English, you start to understand how the language works and how different grammar structures are used in different situations.
I have really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I have a much deeper understanding of used to, would, and the simple past tense now.
I'm glad to hear that. I always enjoy talking about grammar and exploring all of its complexities.
It makes you realize that language is always changing and that there is always more to learn. It's a journey of discovery that never really ends.
That's so true. Language is constantly growing and evolving, and as language learners, we have the chance to go on this exciting journey and see how it all works.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of an onion, and each layer reveals something new and interesting.
I like that metaphor. The more we explore the details of language, the more we can appreciate how beautiful and complex it is.
You know, it's actually quite fun. It's like solving a puzzle or figuring out a code. It's challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
I agree. Learning a new language is both challenging and fun. It takes effort and dedication, but the rewards are worth it.
Well said. I think the most important thing is to be curious and to see language learning as an adventure. Be ready for challenges and celebrate the victories along the way.
That's a great attitude to have. Learning a language is a journey, and you should enjoy every step of the way.
I'm feeling really inspired. I think I'm going to go read a book or watch a movie in English and see if I can spot these grammar structures in action.
That's a great idea. The more you use English, the stronger your understanding of these grammar points will become, and the more fluent you will become.
Well, it's time to wrap up part 2 of our exploration of used to, would, and the simple past.
We look forward to continuing our exploration with you in part 3.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. We're continuing our discussion about all those interesting ways to talk about things we did in the past.
It's true. There are a lot of ways to talk about the past in English, but there's no need to be overwhelmed.
No, not at all.
The more we practice and notice the small differences, the easier it will be to use these forms correctly without even thinking about it.
I think that's really encouraging. It's like anything else in language. The more you use it, the more natural it becomes.
Exactly. It's like when you learn to ride a bike.
Oh, good example.
At first, it feels shaky and you might fall off a few times, but after you practice, it becomes easy and you don't even have to think about it anymore.
I like that comparison. You know, it's not just about speaking correctly.
No.
It's about expressing yourself well. It's about telling your story in a way that people enjoy listening to, and in a way that clearly shows what you mean.
That's so true. Grammar is an important tool for using language well. It helps us organize our thoughts and communicate clearly so other people can understand us.
You are right. It's like when you build a house. Grammar is the structure that holds everything together. Without a good structure, the house will fall apart.
That's a great way to think about it. And a well-built house is not only strong, but also beautiful.
Oh, that's a nice thought.
And a sentence that is grammatically correct can be beautiful too.
We've really covered a lot today. It's been so interesting exploring all these little details about used to, would, and the simple past tense. I feel like I understand these grammar points much better now, and I hope our listeners do too.
I'm sure they do. I hope this conversation will encourage them to listen closely to how these forms are used in everyday English.
I hope so too. And to all of our friends listening, if you've enjoyed this look at English grammar, subscribe to our channel. We'll be back with more exciting explorations of the world of language and learning. There is so much more to discover together.
Until then, happy learning, everyone.
Goodbye for now.